Hey everyone, it's Dick here. This past weekend I managed to slip away with my friends Bones and the Baron for 4 days of motorcycling. The plan was to take 4 days to explore some of the lesser beaten roads of North Wales. Friday and Monday were reserved for riding to and from the southeast of England, reserving Saturday and Sunday for full days riding around Snowdonia. We rode up to Wales on Friday after the morning rush hour and tried to find some interesting roads to avoid a thankless slog along the motorway. Despite our best efforts looking at maps and using various moto-specific navigation apps, the homogeneous English roads and villages I am used to closer to London extended all the way to the Welsh border. Any twisty roads we found afforded us about a half a dozen bends before hitting another speed-controlled section. We didn't discover any extended interesting roads until reaching Shropshire, which was already late in the day, meaning we were less inclined to enjoy them or linger for very long. I rode my F700 GS up to Wales from London and finally, after years of ownership, found where that bike shines. I've said in the past that I thought the bike was boring. On a long distance run, however, it is anything but. Punchy, comfortable, fuel efficient, it ticked all of the boxes. I was immediately jealous of Shakedown for having it on our winter tour. He definitely had a different experience to mine in Scotland. For the Saturday ride, I opted to ride the Street Cup. I knew we were looking for twisty roads and a roadster is more suited for those. My friend Bones was on his 20-plate BMW 1250 GS. It was so clean I thought he had just collected it from the showroom. It also had a shiny new tire on the back. Despite the immaculate condition of his GS, Bones had already clocked 8,000 miles before setting out on our mini tour. The Baron was on his 07-plate Moto Guzzi Grizzo with about 30,000 miles on the clock. Despite having a newer BMW R1200R with a couple of thousands of miles on it, he insisted on riding the Guzzi, but not without bringing extra rocker gaskets just in case. Other than his absolute love for his Grizzo, one of the reasons the Baron opted to ride it was the impending extension of the London ULEZ to the M25 next year. Although his is an 07 plate, the ULEZ cutoff is for vehicles first registered after June 2007, and his Grizzo is from April of that year. I suggested getting his bike tested for an exemption certificate to see if he could get a stay of execution, which piqued his interest immeasurably. I have to take a moment to send a thank you out to my viewer, Street Twin Rider, who heard my cries about bar-end mirrors and posted me his stock Street Twin mirrors to deliver me from my personal hell. I'll be sending off my awful bar-end mirrors to another viewer in a pay-it-forward gesture, which I always love to see between the brothers and sisters of motorcycling. In a past video, I pondered the notion of the turning around on a motorcycle tour, contemplating the dull melancholy when having to turn homeward. I realize now, in reviewing the footage of our mini tour to Wales this past weekend, that I've never really considered the anticipation, the excitement, the adrenaline, the optimism, or the stress of starting a tour in any depth. I'm not unaware of my good fortune at being able to travel for the sake of travel. I acknowledge the millions of displaced peoples from violent conflict and military action now and for the last 20 and more years. Che Guevara, in his memoir The Motorcycle Diaries, wrote of his and his traveling companion Alberto Granado's encounter with migrant workers one ice-cold night. The couple were forced from their ancestral home and land, made to travel to find work in dangerous mining operations. When they asked Che and Alberto why they were traveling, Che simply said, "Just traveling." The couple was astonished, and then the woman blessed them for their blessed travel. Che and Alberto felt ashamed. While I acknowledge the hardships of others, I do not feel ashamed in my travels. Rather, I feel empowered and inspired. I feel free. I'm aware of my good fortune and the peace I have in my life. I am appreciative in my blessed own travel. I'd argue that the start of any motorcycle tour is something we generally take for granted. This is not to be confused with the high regard we afford the overall concept of getting away on our bikes, the anticipation, the excitement. No, the start is what is underestimated. It actually takes me a while to ease into the feeling that a tour has actually begun. When we are finally on the road and moving, there is a disconnect, or rather a disbelief that the planning and preparation has culminated in getting underway. It is overwhelming in some respects. When as the stress and adrenaline of setting off dissipates, the wind blasts you in the chest for the very first time. When the low frequency of your helmet cutting through the atmosphere hums through your earplugs. When the immediate fatigue of the road warns you of the hours of sustained resistance you are about to endure. When you acknowledge the practical reality of what you have committed yourself to accomplish. Luckily for us, the unseasonably sunny weather extended into Saturday, and after a hearty breakfast we set out to meet my new friend Craig Clin over the hills in Pentrafoilus. miles. I still haven't swapped the high Vance and High Scrambler exhaust that I installed a year ago for my new low 2-to-1 exhaust that I had purchased. So I was a dash worried about spending the day with my foot hanging off of the foot peg. But I remained optimistic anyway. The ride over the moors to the edge of Snowdonia is a loping, twisty, narrow roller coaster of joy. The bright sapphire sky, dry roads, and dense rusty plateaus to the horizon spoiled us from the off. The roads through the moors are some of my favorite in Wales, and I'd argue some of my favorite in the world. They are narrow and twisty, but slow. As you may know from watching my other videos, I am not out for a knee-dragging, peg-scraping time when I'm out on a motorcycle. 40 miles an hour on these roads are fast enough for me, and should be fast enough for many. The landscape is paramount. The road twists and turns, yes, but it rises and falls with the geography. It hides flora and fauna behind every turn. It changes with the light and every direction it wends. Taking your time through a moor is vital, not only so you don't miss all of the majesty that there is to see, but so as to make it out alive on the other side. The roads are narrow and the curves are mostly blind, which means death lurks for the hasty behind each one. Your ride ends real quick if you go quickly. What draws me into the moors more than anything else is that the roads through them lead from nowhere to nowhere. There's no discernible destination at one end or the other. No towns or villages, no coffee shops or petrol stations. They lead from one rural route to another, with a long journey to anywhere in particular. While making your way across the moor, one can imagine back to a time to when the proposition of crossing one was heavily weighed against the possibility of getting lost, injured, or killed. When you crest a hill to see a glittering lake, primal relief floods over you. Life will persevere another day. It is for these imaginings and many more that I choose to travel on the back of a motorcycle. If you like that video and you want to see more like them, hit like, share, and subscribe.